Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit.
Okay, you citizens of the world, all of you, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of September 19th. And it always brings me pleasure to bring on this regular visitor to the show now, the one and only Paul Draus. And Paul Draus is not only a soccer player, an activist, an author, an artist, and a sociology professor at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. He's a longtime associate of this show. Back in the day when it first started being broadcast over the WLUW from the Heartland Cafe, Paul and I were both hosts and sort of producers of the show. And I've asked Paul to come on as regularly as he wants to share whatever's on his mind or he thinks that we ought to know about. And one of the things that I thought we could do to start off this session would be to invoke a memory of the time he made arrangements and brought the incomparable Studs Terkel up to the Heartland Cafe for a wonderful interview we had. And I don't know if that interview is on the YouTube site or not. It should be. We probably have it recorded. We do have some nice photographs from them. I took some, but the best was by Carla, Paul's wife, and we're going to try to get that to Hal, our engineer, so he can post it along with this little wrap. So good day to you, Paul. It's great to see you out there in the Detroit sunshine. And how about telling us about the time you arranged to bring Studs Terkel to the Heartland Cafe?
All right, great to see you also, Michael. And wow, that's going back a ways. You know, my memories of Studs Terkel go back to really the early 1990s when I was still living in Wyoming, and I wrote him a letter asking, you know, if he would be interested in meeting me when I came home to Chicago on a Thanksgiving break, because I was at graduate school at the University of Wyoming. And he called my parents' house because I left my parents' phone number outside of Chicago, and he left a voicemail message. I wish I still had that message. He's like, yeah, I just read this letter by a guy, you know, Paul Draus, and yeah, I'll meet with him. He sounds good to me. You know, I talked about like how him and Nelson Algren had come to take on like almost like I sort of developed almost like a familial sense of ancestry with these writers and this sort of tradition of Chicago literature, and sort of this, which also had a lot to do with kind of the social conscience of Chicago, I guess you would say. And nobody represented that more than Studs Terkel. And so I actually did go and have lunch with them like on like a Thanksgiving break in like, I don't know, in 1991 or something like that. And we walked because he didn't drive or anything, you know. So we walked, like I met him like at the radio station building, which is the classical station. What's the call numbers, Michael?
98.7 WFMT.
Yeah, FMT, that's right. And so we walked over to some like, you know, like a steak joint or something. And I think he had a martini at lunch, and we talked about the primaries. You know, this was in the middle of, tell us what year it was. It was the year that Bill Clinton was running as a Democratic candidate. The Democratic primaries included Tom Harkin, at that time a Republican from Iowa, and then there was
No, he was a Democrat from Iowa.
Sorry, Democrat. That's what I'm saying. But now they're all Republicans. Back then, yeah, and a very progressive Democrat.
Yeah, I like
a labor Democrat, and then there was also a Democrat from Nebraska who was Kerry, not John Kerry that ran for president later, but what was his?
He was a governor or a senator or something.
Yeah, he was also a Vietnam veteran, lost part of his leg or something like that. Anyway, I remember we were talking about this primary, so this must have been 92 then, or 91, going into 92. I don't remember. Anyway, so I had met him then, and then when you and I started working together, this was a couple years later when I was back at Loyola, I had also met his editor. It was a woman named Sydney Lewis who wrote a book about Cook County Hospital I met her through like a mutual friend, and she worked very actively with Studs as his editor. She would work with him when he would do all these interviews, his oral histories, and she was the one that would sort of take those tapes and stuff and like, and kind of like transcribe and edit them down and things. And so she was very, very close with them. And so when we were trying to look for like a really special guest for Live from the Heartland, was it like for some special occasion that we were trying to get like a big guest? I don't remember, but
I remember you got him.
Yeah. So yeah, he was very personable. I had to go pick him up from his house that day. We arranged it through Sydney and talking to Studs on the phone. He was not like a big email guy, I don't think. And I went to his house in Uptown and picked him up there and brought him over to the Heartland and dropped him off. And he kind of like hobbled into the Heartland, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, we have some nice pictures and good memories of that time. I did get interviewed by Studs Terkel. I don't know if it was before or after that, but it was in my coming out of my ultra left wing phase and being a little new agey with opening the Heartland Cafe and, a lot of new ideas. And I tried to kind of mix spirituality and left wing politics. I don't think he ever used that interview. And I don't know.
It's in a vault somewhere.
But I was once I was in touch with Sydney about trying to find it.
Yeah, okay.
Enough on Studs Terkel. He was a hell of a guy. He's still an inspiration for all of us who listen to the radio.
Well, hey, listen, I mean, he was a big inspiration on me and even becoming probably a sociologist because, the stories that he captured and the way that he approached history and trying to understand history from like the ground up, trying to understand the perspective of different people, the sort of the deep listening that he did. It was literary, but it was also deeply, deeply sociological. And so, yeah, I have a big debt to him, but I mean, he's a Chicago legend also. So,
well, let's switch topics here a little bit and go to Detroit. I've always liked the city of Detroit. When I was a kid, I rooted for the Detroit Lions. I had a neighbor who had moved from Detroit, and I looked in the days of Rising Up Angry. We were allied with the White Panther Party and the late great John Sinclair, and we also knew about the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. There was a lot of great stuff happening in Detroit. Detroit then has had some rough times. It's I think on the back of your book, someone in talking about your book, Forging Identity, which we'll get to again, referred to Detroit as a battered yet hopeful city. So my hope is that you will come on the show regularly, once a month or so with something you want to share, whether it be about a book, whether about some political activity or whatever. You're a busy guy. You're involved in a lot of things. So how about socking it to us with some solid information about the mayoral election, the governor's race, Senate races, and whatever else is on your mind. On your mark, get set, go.
Okay, so like Michigan, for those of you that don't follow like Michigan politics, we have a Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, who's term limited, so she's not running for re-election. So we have a governor's race coming up next year, and that's already heating up. So you've got a number of people sort of vying for the governor's seat. And it's a little bit complicated because the race includes not only traditional sort of a Republican who hasn't been identified yet, I don't think, as a nominee, because of and there's no strong front-running Republican yet, and a Democratic primary, but also there's an independent running, a very prominent independent who happens to be the current mayor of the city of Detroit. So the current mayor of the city of Detroit is a guy named Mike Duggan, who's kind of like a machine politics guy going, back decades in the city of Detroit, but was elected the first white mayor of Detroit, elected in more than 2 decades, was elected in 2013, and he's had a very successful run as politically for sure as mayor, pretty much unchallenged. People have tried to run against him. Nobody's come close. The first time he ran, he was knocked off the ballot of the Democratic primary because somebody else got on the ballot, who had a name similar to his. Something happened. No, he was knocked off the ballot for some technicality and not having enough signatures. He actually ran in the general election as a write-in candidate. And even though there was like another shadow candidate with a name that was spelled exactly the same, except for one letter to try to confuse people, he still won as a write-in candidate, over a well-known African-American sheriff. He's still the late Benny Napoleon. He won by a pretty decent margin, and then he's been, pretty solidly, reelected ever since then. And he's done a lot in terms of kind of right-sizing the city's finances and stuff like that. Now, a lot of it he benefited from other things taking place. There was a bankruptcy, there was financial management. A lot of things were done to the city of Detroit that kind of enabled him to enter in with a sort of a clean slate in terms of some of the finances and things like that. But he's done a lot. He's seen as a successful mayor here for getting a lot of things done. And the population of the city of Detroit, this is the big measure of success in Detroit, has the population stopped declining, right? Detroit used to be about 2 million people. It dropped to less than 700,000.
Wow.
And so the measure of success for every mayor since then has been, when will the population stop dropping and when will it start increasing? And there's signs that may have happened now around 650,000 people, right? But now he's decided to run for governor as an independent. He wants to take this sort of reputation for fixing Detroit, quote unquote, and being, he's been a Democrat his whole career, but he's sort of trying to make this move to get away from like the polarizing politics of our time, I guess you'd say, and also appeal to people statewide who sort of look at Detroit and say, oh, what a success story. Mike Duggan is the guy that fixed Detroit. Obviously, he's a white candidate coming out of Detroit, and to see if he can parlay that into success at the state level. Word is he has a pretty good chance. He's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of name recognition and so on. But you also have the current attorney general, sitting attorney general, not attorney general, sorry, Secretary of State, Joyce Benson is running. She's probably the front runner on the Democratic side. And then we don't know who the Republican will be yet. So that's going to be a really interesting race to watch, both in terms of Michigan politics, but also what it might mean for national politics to have like a state with an independent winning, the governor's seat, possibly.
Well, that might be a tack that a number of Democrats take, is to run as an independent. I'm wondering, your personal view, who would you prefer? A lifelong Democrat running as an independent named Duggan, or a Democrat who's currently in the government named Joyce Benson? Who are you rooting for? Who would be more progressive, or you think do more for more people?
Well, I mean, in this case, I don't know that either one of them would be particularly progressive by that measure. We can talk about the senatorial race where there are some genuine progressives running, at least one.
Right.
I would say that I would probably go with Benson as my preference. And this has more to do with sort of intra-Detroit types of stuff and my views on Duggan and so on. But I would say I'd probably choose either one of them over whatever the Republicans come up with. I think Duggan would probably be an effective, competent governor. But, maybe I don't agree with everything he's done in Detroit and so on. But, yeah, so that would probably be my, just looking at it right now. And I haven't, this is, I know a lot more about Duggan than I do about Benson, actually. So maybe it's because I just don't know a lot of, Benson's. I haven't gone into the weeds on looking at her positions and so on. She has been effective Secretary of State and has, the main thing that sticks out for me is around elections. She's done a lot to firm up and solidify the election process here, which was under assault after 2020, as you remember. So we actually have very effective absentee ballot system and so on.
You mentioned the Senate race. that's going to be important. The Senate race all over the country, we're hopeful that somehow we could squeak through with a majority. We meaning the little bit to the left of center. What do you got on the Senate race there? Who's running and who is the candidate you think would be the most, let's say, progressive?
So on the Democratic side, and you've got three main candidates that are running. The top two are, one is Haley Stevens, who's really a very mainstream Democrat, who's kind of probably the favorite of, the sort of the Schumer, Hakeem.
No endorsement, Dami, guys.
Right. Yeah. So and she has been, progressives have called out the support she receives from AIPAC and so on. So Haley Stevens is probably the most centrist Democrat. I think she's the front runner, but a close second is a guy named Abdul Al-Sayed, who's actually a physician and a PhD in, I think, epidemiology. He used to be the director of public health for the city of Detroit. And then he went on to host a podcast called America Dissected. He's very progressive. He's very smart. He's very charismatic. I mean, the big, challenge he faces is his name is Abdullah Sayed, and he's running a statewide race. And so I think a lot of people have questions, even though he's running a close second, and he will go anywhere and talk to anybody. And I think when people listen to him, he's got the support of Bernie Sanders. He ran for governor, against Gretchen Whitmer a few years ago. And obviously he didn't prevail, but he did well enough that he got a lot of notice nationally. So he's like the number two. And then there's another state senator named Mallory. It's a Mallory Mick something.
Oh, good enough.
Mallory McMorrow. Yeah. So, and actually, she's probably, like on the outside right now. She's a state senator whose probably politics fall somewhere in between Al-Sayed and Stevens. I think she's more progressive than Stevens, but not as much so as Al-Sayed. But I think right now she's sort of running behind him. Her background is really interesting too. She came out of the private sector. She was a car designer. She got into politics in part as a reaction to the first Trump regime, and saying, basically, we have to do something. I have to get involved in politics to try to, correct things and try to, become more engaged, right? So actually, she's kind of more in the vein of like, I'm just a regular person getting involved in politics. I'm not ideological. I just want to get things fixed. But in terms of her actual politics, she's probably more progressive than Stevens is. And, she's sort of like the guy in Maine has a similar tack to this, Graham Plattner. I don't know if you've been following.
Yeah, no.
Following that. So, so her thing is like, I come out of the private sector, I'm a mom, I'm this and that, but I really just want to fix our politics and get this, and she's, of course, she's Democratic, obviously pro-democracy. And,
well, I'm sure you'll keep us posted on our future chats.
And I'll pay more attention as that heats up. This is, we're in 2025. This is all for 2026. The most immediate election in Michigan is the Detroit mayoral election, which is happening in November. So Duggan is not running again, but he has sort of anointed Mary Sheffield, who's the current head of the city council, longtime city council member, daughter of a very prominent minister, Horace Sheffield II, whose father, Horace Sheffield Sr., was also a very, very prominent, reverend minister in Detroit. And Detroit politics and religion are very closely aligned in the Black community. So she's a strong front runner as a mayor. And it looks like she's probably almost, she's running against another minister named Solomon Kinloch. But I think his name is Kinloch, but she's probably a lock for the mayor's race.
Let's go to Dearborn and the city council. Now, Dearborn has a very large Arab Palestinian population. Everyone might remember back to the most recent presidential election when, Dearborn, a strong Democratic stronghold, were PO'd at Biden, and a lot of them went for Trump. You mentioned there's some kind of the mayor of Dearborn shut down a local Islamophobe in the city council. I think we're hoping that Dearborn does go Democratic again. Fill us in, Paul, on what's going on their city council.
Yeah, so our mayor here, and it's a small enough city that I know him a little bit because I sit on like a commission, economic development commission for the city of Dearborn. He's a young guy, grew up in Dearborn. He's of Lebanese heritage, Muslim family. His name is Abdullah Hamoud. He was a state senator before. He's very, very, like I said, he's very, very smart. He has a master in public health and a master in business administration from the University of Michigan. Very dynamic state senator, became elected mayor with a strong majority. There are a couple of people running against him, I think, this fall. I don't know if any of them have a chance. But in the presidential election, of course, the big issue here was Gaza and Biden's anemic response to Benjamin Netanyahu's assault on the people of Gaza. And so a lot of people were very, very frustrated by that, including the mayor. I mean, I don't think the mayor never met with Trump. He also refused to meet with Trump or Trump's people because he didn't think that that Trump he didn't think that Trump was serious in wanting to be a president of peace. But they did make that pitch in Dearborn that Trump was the president of peace. They had big billboards up. They tied Kamala Harris to Israel. They did all kinds of things like that here. And so I think the end result was that, and Dearborn it's about half Muslim, a little more than half Muslim Arab people. Not all the Arab people are Muslim either. But it's Lebanon, Iraq. There are a good number of Palestinians here. They're not a majority. Yemen, there are a lot of Yemeni people here. They're a significant percentage of the overall population, more and more politically involved. And so in 2024, they voted for Donald Trump by a plurality. He didn't win over 50%, but you had, the sort of the spoiler candidate in there too, who got about 13% of the vote.
Well, what just happened on your city council?
So, and this was just on a local, like Instagram and on the local news. There was a street in Dearborn that was named, how they put up the honorary street sign to honor like a prominent local citizen? Yeah. There's a guy here who's a local journalist. He runs the Arab American News. He's very, very highly respected here. He's a proud, Arab American, but a proud American, a patriotic American. I mean, and so this was actually a decision by the county government to approve naming this street after this prominent local journalist. And this guy showed up at a city council meeting and raised objections to it and said it's basically like calling the street like Hezbollah Street or Hamas Street or something like that. And so the mayor was very strong in sort of shutting him down. It basically said, I understand that you live here, but we'll be happy when and if you move, because you don't represent the inclusive community that we want to build here, because the guy has a reputation apparently locally for standing outside of mosques and saying things. So, I mean, I guess I say all that to say that, the mayor here has not been shy in asserting, a strong viewpoint in terms of the type of place that he wants the city to be. And also being critical of the Democratic Party as well. Like he was very critical of the, Biden administration.
Paul, we're running out of time. We have a lot more we'd like to talk to you about, but we're going to invite you back next month. I want everyone to know that you have a new book out called Forging Identity, and it's about an artist named Carlos Nielbach, and it's got beautiful little drawings that you did, and people can get it if they want. It's the University of Michigan State Press.
Michigan State University, yep.
I know that you probably are conflicted about whether you root for the Bears or the Bulls or the White Sox or Detroit. We could talk about some sports next time. And
I heard that the Lions just trounced a certain
They did. They killed
team
the
from
Bears.
Chicago.
It was very depressing if you're a big Bears fan.